In the heat of COVID, an Asian man was arrested for training his pit bull to drop bricks on people who rang his doorbell. Attack of the Dead Men was a World War I battle during which the Germans bombarded the Russians with a mixture of poisonous gases. The effects were so devastating that the Russians coughed up pieces of their own organs and their skin started dissolving. The zombie-like appearance was so horrifying to the 7,000 Germans that they gave up the battle and ran. Morbid Facts, Part 287. This photo of Sean and Michael McQuilkin was taken at Sequoia National Park just seconds before they were struck by lightning in 1975. All three, including their photographer sister, survived the strike, but younger brother Sean suffered third-degree burns and spent nearly 6 months in a coma. After being unable to overcome the physical and mental toll of the incident, Sean sadly ended up taking his own life in 1989. After having an allergic reaction to asthma medicine in 2009, Tennessee woman Shanina Isom has been suffering from a mysterious skin condition that causes her to grow fingernails in place of her hair. In 2004, 200 women armed with kitchen knives stormed into an Indian courthouse before stabbing and murdering Akuya Dav, a gang leader, serial killer, and rapist who kept escaping his sentencing due to bribes. Every single woman later claimed responsibility for killing him. Morbid Facts, Part 289. The short-faced bear was once the most abundant bear in all of North America until it went extinct around 11,000 BC. Some scientists argue that these massive bears delayed human migration into North America because they kept killing men trying to cross the Bering Strait. Heart Attack Grill is a restaurant in Las Vegas where customers over 350 pounds eat for free. The only vegan option on the menu is cigarettes, and up to 3 people have died from heart attacks while eating there. In 1940, Walt Disney hired 11 little people to dress up as Pinocchio and wave to people at the movie's premiere. He left them on a theater balcony with enough food and wine for the day, but there was no way for them to get down. By late afternoon, they had all taken off their thick, sweaty costumes and were naked, drunk, and swearing at parents and their children. Morbid Facts, Part 234. A Dutch teenager who was going bungee jumping in Spain died after a horrible misunderstanding. The instructor, who had poor English, said no jump, but she heard it as now jump and ended up jumping straight to her death. This is exactly why commands are never supposed to be given with a no or a don't. President JFK's convertible wasn't scrapped when he was assassinated in 1963. They just welded a roof on top and it was used by the next 4 presidents right up until 1977. Mohammed Bajay was an Iranian serial killer who raped and killed at least 40 young boys in the early 2000s. But his crimes only gained worldwide attention because of the way in which he was executed. He was stoned by an angry mob, lashed 100 times, stabbed by the brother of one of his victims, and then hanged. Morbid Facts, Part 235. Slovenian woman Julia Adlisic cut off her own hand with a table saw and purposely left it at home when she went to the hospital. She did this to receive $1.2 million in payout from the 5 insurance companies she signed up for. But instead of getting paid, she was sentenced to 2 years in jail for insurance fraud. Anyone who moves to Villas Las Estrellas in Antarctica must have their appendix preemptively removed because the nearest hospital is over 600 miles away. This is an image of a patient with claustrophobia who panicked during a CT scan. This little girl is the stepdaughter of serial killer John Wayne Gacy. Directly under her bedroom was the crawl space where John stuffed the bodies of 26 of his victims, meaning she literally slept over a graveyard. Morbid Facts, Part 237. In 2002, 2 airplanes collided over Germany, killing all 71 total passengers on board. 2 years later, the air traffic controller who was responsible was stabbed to death by a Russian man named Vitaly Kaloyev, whose wife and 2 kids were victims of the crash. Kaloyev was only sentenced to 2 years in prison and was hailed as a hero back in Russia. In 2019, a British teenager went blind after maintaining a horrendous diet for several years. It consisted of French fries, white bread, Pringles, and the occasional slice of ham. In 2013, Disney abandoned their policy of letting disabled people skip lines at their theme parks. This was because too many people were hiring disabled tour guides to help them skip the lines. Morbid Facts, Part 238. In 2003, Kenneth Maxwell called 911 to report a house fire that he came across while driving home from work. But his voice suddenly cut off during the call, and when firemen arrived at the scene, Kenneth was found shot dead in his car. It It turned out the fire was created to cover up a double homicide, and the killer saw Kenneth making the call. Morticians often use these spiky contacts to keep the eyes of the dead closed during funeral viewings. During World War II, one of the first Japanese cities that the US planned on nuking was its former capital, Kyoto. The only reason it wasn't bombed was because US Secretary of War Henry Stimson spent his honeymoon there and thought it was a nice place. So instead of Kyoto, they went with Nagasaki. Waste chopping was a popular execution method in ancient China that involved sawing the body clean in half. But it was banned in 1734 after a Chinese official was cut in half and still managed to write the Chinese word for awful 7 times in his own blood. In 2005, one sheep decided to jump off a cliff, causing 1,500 others to follow. But only the first 450 actually died, since the rest of the falls were cushioned by the dead bodies below. The Great Whiskey Fire of Dublin killed 13 people in 1875, but none of them died from the actual fire. They were all killed by alcohol poisoning after drinking too much of the whiskey pouring through the streets. Morbid Facts, Part 284. In 1959, a white man named John Howard Griffin disguised himself as a black man and traveled through the Deep South for 6 weeks. After writing a book about his experiences with racism, he was forced to move to Mexico for several years due to the barrage of death threats. Albert Einstein died at the age of 76 after refusing to undergo surgery on his heart. He was quoted saying, "I want to go when I want. It is tasteless to prolong life artificially. I have done my share, it's time to go. I will do so elegantly." In September of 1974, 18-year-old Milika Kostic was lured to a 12th-floor apartment by 5 men who attempted to assault her. When given the chance, she decided to jump from the apartment window and fell about 120 feet onto a cafe awning below. She died 2 days later, but was conscious for long enough to give police a full description of the awful incident. Morbid Facts, Part 285. This pic shows Thomas Whitaker on the right celebrating his college graduation with his mom Patricia and brother Kevin. But in reality, Thomas flunked out of school and devised a plan so that his family would never find out. When they returned home the same night this photo was taken, a gunman hired by Thomas ambushed the family, killing Kevin and Patricia and wounding the father Ken. Thomas was initially sentenced to death for the 2 murders, but in 2018 he was spared just 40 minutes before his execution. Turns out his father forgave him and requested for his only remaining family member to not be executed. In 1991, Nigerian prophet Daniel Abadunrin apparently wanted to recreate the story of Daniel in the Bible, so he broke into a lion cage at the zoo with the belief that God wouldn't allow them to open their mouths. But as soon as the lions saw Daniel, they tore him to shreds. Morbid Facts, Part 286. Back in June, a 3-year-old boy named Riker Webb wandered off from his family's yard in Montana and went missing in the wilderness for 2 days. This photo was taken when he was miraculously found alive in a shed more than 2 miles away from his home. Authorities say he was extremely lucky considering the valley he was found in is riddled with mountain lions and bears. Morbid Facts, Part 239. These are photos of former Ukrainian President Viktor Yushchenko before and after he was poisoned by Vladimir Putin in 2004. He and his family believe the assassination attempt was ordered because Yushchenko wanted Ukraine to integrate more with the rest of Europe. A doctor chronicled the progression of Alzheimer's disease in one of his patients by collecting her signatures on medical forms over the years. Ever since the Taliban takeover, the price for a kidney on the Afghan black market has dropped from $4,000 to $1,500. This is because so many people have been selling their own kidneys just so they can afford to feed their children. Such high supply of the organ has caused the price to plummet in short time. Morbid Facts, Part 240. In 1981, Japanese college student Issei Sagawa invited over his classmate Renee Hartfelt for dinner at his apartment. He told the 25-year-old Dutch student that he would help her translate some poetry for a school assignment, but his real plan was much darker. As Hartfelt was reading from a poem, Sagawa shot her in the back of the head and killed her instantly. He spent the next 2 days eating her flesh so that he could absorb her health and beauty, characteristics which he felt he lacked. It was a plan that was decades in the making, but it only took police 2 days to arrest him. But a French court deported him to Japan, where he avoided serving any jail time due to a legal technicality. He remains free to this day and even says he wants to taste human flesh again before he dies. Morbid Facts, Part 242. King Tut is the only ancient Egyptian mummy known to have been mummified with an erection. His ancient member unfortunately broke off soon after the tomb was discovered. The 1897 Battle of Sarigari is considered to be one of the greatest final stands in history. 21 soldiers of the Sikh regiment fought off an army of 10,000 Afghans and killed 600 of them before being defeated. In 1881, 20th U.S. President James Garfield survived an assassination attempt, but one of the two bullets pierced his intestine. As a result, he was unable to hold down any food he ate, so doctors had to resort to something drastic. For the final 3 months of his life, the president was fed egg yolks, milk, and whiskey through his butthole. Morbid Facts, Part 243. In the early 2000s, CEO Stuart Parnell created a salmonella outbreak by purposely tainting his peanut products to save some cash. As a result of his greediness, 9 people died and hundreds of others got sick. This photo shows Parnell refusing to talk when a member of Congress challenges him to eat his own products in front of a committee. The Altamira man is an extremely well-preserved fossil of a Neanderthal who fell down a sinkhole over 100,000 years ago. Discovered in 1993, experts are still working on a way to extract the skeleton from the calcite without damaging it. Stephen King would do so much cocaine while writing that he had to stuff cotton up his nose to prevent blood from dripping onto his typewriter. There are various books that he doesn't even remember writing, including the 1981 classic Cujo. For nearly 300 years, the office of the Pope was almost certainly a death sentence. 30 out of the first 31 popes were violently murdered. George Washington died because his doctors tried to cure his sore throat by draining his blood. He lost more than half his blood before they stopped the treatment, and he died hours later. This photo shows neo-Nazi leader Jeff Hall with his 10-year-old son Joseph in April of 2011. The morning after this was taken, Joseph murdered his father by shooting him in the head while he was asleep. The boy said he was simply tired of Jeff abusing his family, but a court still sentenced him to 10 years in prison. Morbid Facts, Part 248. In the 1950s, LA businessman Richard Poncher purchased the crypt above Marilyn Monroe's. As a final wish, he asked his wife to bury him face down so that he could spend all of eternity on top of Marilyn Monroe. The deadliest air attack in human history happened a few months before Hiroshima. In March of 1945, the U.S. Air Force painted a giant flaming X over the heart of Tokyo using napalm strikes. At least 100,000 Japanese civilians were killed within a span of 3 hours. There's a section of Yellowstone where you could get away with murder due to a loophole in the U.S. Constitution. The Zone of Death is a 50-square-mile piece of Idaho that's completely uninhabited. This means if you commit a crime within this zone, there could be no jury since no one lives there, and therefore no trial for the crime. Morbid Facts, Part 249. The time machine in Back to the Future was originally supposed to be a refrigerator, but the director was afraid that kids would imitate the movie and become trapped in fridges and die, which had been an epidemic in the decades prior. So instead, they went with the DeLorean. U.S. law requires that eggs sold in grocery stores must be washed. European law requires that eggs sold in grocery stores must not be washed. Both laws are to prevent salmonella. In 2001, German technician Armin Maiwes placed an online ad looking for someone who volunteered to be cannibalized. The offer was accepted by engineer Bernd Brandis, who claimed that he was aroused by the idea of being eaten. After eating Brandis and eventually going to jail, Maiwes became a vegetarian, but he claims that there are at least 800 active cannibals living throughout Germany. Morbid Facts, Part 278. Frank Lentini was a circus performer in the early 1900s who was born with a parasitic twin. This resulted in him having 3 legs, 4 feet, 16 toes, and yes, 2 sets of functioning genitals. He married, had 4 kids, and lived to the age of 78. Here's a clip of Admiral Jeremiah Denton blinking the word torture in Morse code while he was held captive in the Vietnam War. He was being filmed for Vietnamese propaganda, but U.S. naval intelligence was able to decipher his message. In 1979, gold miners in Alaska stumbled upon this perfectly preserved steppe bison that's right around 50,000 years old. It was so incredibly intact that researchers decided to take a chunk of muscle from its neck and cook it into a meal. It was described as tough like beef jerky, but quite delicious aside from the muddy aftertaste. Morbid Facts, Part 279. Paul McCartney decided not to tell his wife Linda that her cancer progressed and had become terminal. He didn't think it would do her any good if she knew, so she continued riding her horse until the day before she died. These were just some of the wedding rings that were taken from victims of Buchenwald concentration camp during the Holocaust. It's estimated that around 100,000 Japanese people vanish without a trace every year. Many of these cases are people simply trying to save their honor after a divorce, job loss, or a failed exam. After the 1947 murder of Elizabeth Short, aka Black Dahlia, reporters told her mother that Elizabeth had just taken first place in a beauty contest. Once they had enough information from her for their story, they informed Mrs. Short that her daughter had actually been viciously murdered. Morbid Facts, Part 281. There's a blue whale that sings at such high frequencies that he's unable to communicate with other whales. Nicknamed 52 Blue, his calls have been heard since the 1980s but never receive a response. In 1975, a man died from laughter while watching his favorite TV show, The Goodies. His widow later sent the program a letter thanking them for making her husband's final moments so pleasant. Morbid Facts, Part 244. In 1989, the Buffalo Sabres goalie had his neck sliced by another player's skate, which severed his carotid artery. It resulted in so much blood loss that 11 fans fainted, 2 had heart attacks, and 3 players uked on the ice. His life was saved by the team trainer, who luckily served in the Vietnam War as a combat medic. When he was executed in 1793, King Louis XVI was so fat for the guillotine that it took 2 attempts to fully cut through. About 10,000 Facebook users die every day. Eventually, the number of dead profiles will outnumber the living ones, and Facebook will become a digital graveyard. This is what a Japanese execution chamber looks like, where convicts are killed by long drop hanging through a trap door. In Japan, prisoners on death row aren't told when they'll be executed until 1 hour before it happens. Morbid Facts, Part 246. When filming for The Grinch, the thick makeup and prosthetics made Jim Carrey feel like he was buried alive each day. The physical restraints became so brutal for him that they had to hire a former CIA agent to teach him techniques for coping with torture. You're 10 times more likely to be bitten by a person in New York City than you are to be bitten by a shark at any beach in the world. In 1984, Louisiana karate instructor Jeffrey Doucette was caught molesting an 11-year-old male student in a motel room. A few weeks later, the boy's father disguised himself and waited for Doucette to walk by with police before shooting him in the head. The murder was caught live on camera by local news, but the protective father received no prison time for his act. Morbid Facts, Part 247. In 1961, 5-year-old Nancy Brewster got a lump on her neck and was eventually too sick to go to school. So her deeply religious family brought her to a Christian practitioner who simply prayed for her and said that her illness was an illusion. When she died horribly 2 years later, there was no funeral and the family never spoke of her again. If you ever have to sneeze, just let it rip. In 2018, a British man blew a hole in his throat by holding his nose and mouth shut while sneezing. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks and lucky to be alive. Alexander Litvinenko was a former Russian spy who heavily criticized Vladimir Putin. In 2006, he was quickly rushed to the hospital after being poisoned with a cup of tea in a London hotel. Working with Scottish detectives as he lay dying, he was able to trace the lethal substance to one of his former comrades in the Russian Secret Service, thus solving his own murder case. Morbid Facts, Part 245. When President JFK was assassinated, he was wearing a corset to help with his chronic back pain. Experts say it likely restricted his body and prevented him from ducking down after the first shot. Morbid Facts, Part 242. King Tut is the only ancient Egyptian mummy known to have been mummified with an erection. His ancient member unfortunately broke off soon after the tomb was discovered. The 1897 Battle of Sarigari is considered to be one of the greatest final stands in history. 21 soldiers of the Sikh regiment fought off an army of 10,000 Afghans and killed 600 of them before being defeated. In 1881, 20th U.S. President James Garfield survived an assassination attempt, but one of the 2 bullets pierced his intestine. As a result, he was unable to hold down any food he ate, so doctors had to resort to something drastic. For the final 3 months of his life, the president was fed egg yolks, milk, and whiskey through his butthole. Morbid Facts, Part 243. In the early 2000s, CEO Stuart Parnell created a salmonella outbreak by purposely tainting his peanut products to save some cash. As a result of his greediness, 9 people died and hundreds of others got sick. This photo shows Parnell refusing to talk when a member of Congress challenges him to eat his own products in front of a committee. The Altamira man is an extremely well-preserved fossil of a Neanderthal who fell down a sinkhole over 100,000 years ago. Discovered in 1993, experts are still working on a way to extract the skeleton from the calcite without damaging it. Stephen King would do so much cocaine while writing that he had to stuff cotton up his nose to prevent blood from dripping onto his typewriter. There are various books that he doesn't even remember writing, including the 1981 classic Cujo. Morbidly Wholesome Facts, Part 43. In 2015, Charlie Sheen publicly announced that he had been HIV positive for years. His disclosure led to a 95% increase in the use of HIV testing kits, likely saving thousands of lives. Ecuadorian police had to rescue a terrified sloth from the middle of the highway, and the rescue pictures were so adorable that they immediately went viral. A 34-year-old man with ALS completely lost his ability to move anything, including his eyes. When a brain chip finally allowed him to communicate again, the first thing he said was, "I need a beer."